In spring, when the protagonist was 19 years old, she went to a ball at the request of her teacher. There, she met a man who seemed to be destined for her. He asked if Eliza would like to go to the dance with him. The girl, of course, agreed. It was Emperor Caden of the Atian Empire. He was proud and handsome. He didn't care at all about all the many stares. At that moment, when their eyes met, Eliza realized that there were things in the world much more complicated than magic. It's been a long time since the protagonist turned 22, and this summer she gave birth to a child. She was told that His Majesty wasn't coming after all, and Eliza didn't understand. Was it because she had lost all her strength? It was then that she realized the truth. The Emperor wanted a woman who would become a powerful archmage. But because of the birth of her child, Eliza lost her powers of magic and couldn't be Empress. Since His Majesty didn't give the child a name, Eliza thought about what to name the child. She decided to name the little boy Leon. Leon was so beautiful that with every glance at him, the heart of the protagonist overflowed with joy. She said Leon was the best thing that ever happened to her. She said even the truth of the world couldn't shine brighter than Leon. But in the fall, when the protagonist turned 26, there were 2 accidents when Leon almost died. Eliza knew they were all being chased, and she couldn't let her guard down. But Eliza just wanted Leon to grow up strong. She raised him too strictly. She may not have given him the warmth of a mother's love, but it was all for his sake. In the winter, when the protagonist turned 32, a serious struggle for the throne began between Crown Prince Ascensius and Second Prince Stoem. In the end, Eliza watched from the sidelines and took advantage of their struggle. After Asensio lost his mother at a young age, Eliza was the only one he could rely on, the only one he opened his heart to in this huge palace. He wondered if the girl could ever be called mother. But when he died, Leon cried for his brother. He didn't want his brother to die. He turned to his mother and said his mother should have saved him. But Eliza asked what Leon thought would happen to him if she brought his brother back to life. But Leon replied that it didn't matter to him, because his mother could save him. He said that Asensio had done a lot for them. But the mother in return was angry with her son and said that he had enough of saying such things. The man lying on the ground is no longer the crown prince of this empire, and he is now an ordinary rebel. Eliza turned to her son and told Leon to behave as befitting an heir to the throne. She tried to take her crying son away, but Leon wouldn't do it. He screamed. But the protagonist didn't care if her son hated her or not. But as long as Leon could succeed, such sacrifices meant nothing to the protagonist. Even though Eliza lost her ability to magic, she regained her power for the keys in the deal with Ignis the Fire Spirit. With this power, Eliza continued to stack countless corpses at her feet, until she finally received the greatest gift she could give her son. He held in his hands the crown of the emperor. Leon said that mother has no idea how long he's waited for this day. Elise, too, was overjoyed what had happened to her son. But at one point, Leon threw the wine glass and the crown to the ground. He talked about Chad being dead, Janice and Asensio too, just like his mother wanted. Leon asked if his mother was happy at last. It turned out that Leon had drunk the poison. Elisa looked at her son fearfully and didn't understand what was going on, but Leon replied to keep his mother away from him. He asked if his mother had ever loved him. After all, he thinks he was just an excuse for her, a puppet to replace her husband who didn't love her. Leon says his mother was just projecting her ambitions through him. He asked why his mother gave birth to him. He'd never been happy in his life since he was born. Elise held her dying son in her arms and didn't understand why things had turned out this way. She had done everything in her power. The protagonist was in the water. She heard someone calling her, but she couldn't understand who it was. She heard someone calling her mom. She recognized the voice as belonging to her son. At that moment, the girl opens her eyes and sees her little son in front of her. But she doesn't understand what's happening because Leon drank the poison and died. She doesn't understand how her son is now standing right in front of her. Moreover, he is not so mature at the age he died, but now he is as small as a child. Leon says mom didn't look well, so he just wanted to make sure everything was okay. Elise didn't understand. Was she really asleep right now? At this time, Leon was crying. He said he didn't want to be late for his lessons. As long as the main character has the opportunity to see her son again, she doesn't care if it's in her dreams or his. Her precious that shines brighter than any spark in this world is her baby. The protagonist throws herself into her son's arms. She asks, "Does Leon not want to go to his lessons?" Leon continues to cry and replies that he doesn't want to. After all, he was told that to become a great man he must study hard, and he must be idealistic to show the good quality of a prince. Elise looks at her son and realizes that Leon looks so young, but already at that age she has hurt him. Elise does not realize what she has done to her son. She replies that Leon doesn't have to become a great man, and he doesn't have to study hard or work hard to prove he's a fit prince. Now she wants Leon to become the man he wants to be. After all, no matter what kind of man he is, Eliza will love him. Leon notices that his mother is acting very strangely today. He asks, "Is something wrong?" But his mother replies by suggesting that she take her son out for lunch and then go for a walk. The protagonist offers her son to play late into the night and then go to bed together. The son fearfully agrees with his mom that he will do as she says. He asks that mom just not to cry. But at this time, the tears of the protagonist start to come on their own. Elise realizes that if this isn't a dream, and if by some miracle she's been given a new opportunity, she won't subject her son to things that justify all his welfare. Elise wants to make all his dreams and desires come true this time. Sometime later in the morning, Leon was going to go to his lessons. He was going out. After a brief 3-day break, Leon resumed his schedule. Eliza doesn't mind if Leon plays more. She doesn't understand. Was she really that boring? She needs to learn more about how to play with a child. The maids turn to the main character and says that Mistress should really start preparing for Prince Leon's birthday. She asks what Mistress would like to do. She wonders if they should follow Mistress's instructions from that day on. Eliza knows that the prince's 6th birthday is especially important. If he was able to stay alive until that day, then he has that minimum quality to survive in the imperial palace. This is the day he becomes recognizable as a prince. The protagonist replies that she will ask her son first. The maid is surprised by this. The other maids have heard the conversation, and they don't understand what the mistress has just said and what has gotten into her. Elisa says it will be her son's birthday, so she must first ask what Leon wants. In Elisa's previous life, she went out of her way to give Leon a lavish celebration for his 16th birthday. But Isabel, the first imperial consort, ruined it with her scheming. And Leon spent his worst birthday in an empty ballroom. And now Elise won't let it happen again. Meanwhile, Leon is running to his class as fast as he can because he can't be late. Leon knows that if he's late, he'll be scolded again. Well, when Leon opened the door, there was a teacher standing there who said that Leon was late. He asked, "Did something happen?" Leon says his mom said it's okay if he plays a little longer, and it seems to the boy that his mom likes to play with him. After all, she even said that the boy shouldn't study too much. The teacher asks in surprise, "Did Her Majesty really say that?" The teacher angrily turns to the boy and asks, "Can't Leon really understand that? After all, Her Majesty is testing her son now." Leon didn't understand what the teacher was saying, but she replies that a great man is not so easily tempted. If Leon continues to act like a spoiled child, she wants Leon to imagine how disappointed Her Majesty will be. Leon begins to cry. He understands what the teacher is saying, but he didn't know it. The teacher replies that that's why it doesn't matter what Her Majesty says to her son. She wants Leon not to let himself relax or act like a child. She hopes the little boy understands her. In the evening, the protagonist was putting her son to bed. She said that his birthday is coming up. She wonders what Leon wants to do. The little boy replies that his mother should do as she wishes. The protagonist asks her son if there's anyone he'd like to invite to his birthday party. After all, it is his day after all. Leon remembers the words his teacher said to him today, and he refuses. He asks his mom not to worry about him. After all, the ballroom will be filled with people she invites. Leon replies that he's really fine, and he's grateful that mother asked him first, and that's enough for him. Eliza now realizes what she missed in the past. She replies that then for this birthday, she will make a schedule of her own choosing. And if there's anything in it that her son doesn't like, she asks Leon to tell her right away. Because if Leon tells her, she promises that on his next birthday, she will do exactly as her son wishes. Leon agrees with his mother. The protagonist wishes her son sweet dreams. For his happiness, she will learn about her son one step at a time. The next morning, the protagonist walked down the corridor of the palace. She wondered if her son was still asleep. In front of the protagonist stood a maid. She turns to the mistress, and now Eliza realizes that something is wrong. She feels the tension. The protagonist goes into her son's room and hears the teacher yelling that she still can't believe Leon is wetting the bed, and word of this spreads throughout the palace by the afternoon. And everyone will know that the son of the emperor's wife Lisa is not only unacceptable, but that he's stupid. Who goes to the toilet in bed? She says Her Majesty would be ashamed to show it. When the protagonist hears this, she bursts into her son's room. The teacher looks at the protagonist in surprise. She asks how Eliza has been here for so long. Elisa gets next to her son and starts yelling at the teacher. She had no idea the teacher was so concerned about her reputation. So much so that she scolds her child like that. Madame Sauer appeals to Her Majesty and hopes Eliza knows she's doing it in good faith. She will look back with her honor that everything she does is for the good of Madame and Prince Leon. Eliza replies that if the teacher had known how her radical discipline was hurting her child, she would never have let him come under the care of such a teacher. After all, no matter how good the results would have been, she tells the teacher to go away immediately. She'll deal with her later. The teacher runs out of the boy's room, and now Leon apologizes to his mother because he has embarrassed her. But Elise replies that she is not ashamed of her son. She asks what is so shameful about it. The son replies that it's dirty. But Elise replies that it's okay, and she's glad Leon looks at her that way. She tells her son that everyone can make mistakes, and it's wrong to bully someone for their mistakes like Madame Suhair did, and it's the protagonist's fault for not recognizing the type. This man is. Now she apologizes to her son. She wants Leon to get some rest. Madame Sauer was well known in educational circles, but her actions are too cruel for any discipline. Eliza doesn't realize that if she has been falsely confident in Madame Sauer in the past, the protagonist leaves her son's room and realizes she needs to check it out. At this time, Madame is around the corner of the corridor, watching the protagonist's behavior. The maid runs up to the young mistress and asks what Her Majesty has brought here. Eliza asks that Madame Sauer be summoned. The maid replies that she will do so at once. For some reason, Eliza senses something wrong. She doesn't understand why she's so restless. Madame Suhair has not caused any trouble in the past. After a while, the maid runs up to the young mistress and apologizes for keeping her waiting. She tells her that Madame Sauer is absent at the moment. She asks if Eliza wants her to deliver a message to Madame. Suddenly, Eliza starts shouting for guards to be called to Leon's chambers and to do it now. At this time, it turns out that the teacher Suhair entered Leon's room and asked him if he had a good sleep. Leon replied that he had slept well. The teacher was happy to hear that. She apologizes for being too hard on him earlier. Leon replies that everything is fine and he is the only one to blame. Madame Sauer brought the boy a glass of water because she thought Leon would feel thirsty. So she prepared this one for him in advance. She asks Leon to drink this water. Now the protagonist realizes that she was wrong all this time. She heads to her son's room as quickly as possible. In the past, a couple days after Leon's 6th birthday party, there was an incident in which her son almost died due to poisoning. The perpetrator was a newcomer to the crime, was Madame Sauer. The maid then committed suicide, and Elise failed in her attempts to reach her employers. And now the protagonist thinks that perhaps Madame Suhair was connected to the incident. The protagonist bursts into her son's room. Leon is surprised and doesn't understand what his mother is doing here. The protagonist runs up to her son and knocks the glass of water right out of his hands. Now the protagonist turns to Madame Suhair and asks what she is doing here, because Eliza told Madame to wait until she decides what to do with her. Madame replies that she just wanted to apologize to the prince and brought him a glass of water. She asks Madame to forgive her. Eliza asks, "Is the mistress really talking about her coming for that poor glass of water?" The protagonist asks, why did silver change color in this liquid if it is just water? She asks who the teacher gave this instruction to. The teacher confidently asks if Her Majesty can bear to hear the truth, but Eliza replies that it is not her business. She asks that Madame Suhair be taken away from the place. The protagonist turns to a maid named Marie and says that since Madame Suhair no longer works here now, Marie must take care of her son. Elise asks if the maid understands, but Marie is not sure if she is qualified to do this. If there is a problem with Madame Sauer, perhaps the best option is to find a new maid. But the protagonist replies to the maid that she can handle it. She asks what the maid thinks the task is if she is her right hand. Eliza asks if Marie is not ensuring peace and quiet for her masters in the palace, and that's taking care of the protagonist and the prince. Marie replies that she understood everything the protagonist told her. Eliza realizes that her actions changed the past, so now she always has to be careful. She doesn't know why she feels like she's back in the past. Her deal with the spirit of the Fire King has imprinted itself on her soul, and even if Eliza has gone back to the past of her and Ignis, no matter how many times Eliza called out to him, she never got an answer. Eliza didn't understand why that was so. She asked to be answered. The protagonist walked outside. The guards looked at her in surprise. They didn't understand who the pretty girl was. Another guard replied that it's not often you see someone with silver hair and pale blue eyes. They suggested that it was most likely the forgotten emperor consort. As far as one of the guards knows, she has no one outside the castle. They didn't understand why the mistress is here, and apparently they're about to find out. They stop the young mistress and ask her to state her name and the reason for the visit of the Ministry of Magical Communications. Eliza answers nothing. The creepy ones ask, did the mistress not hear them? Eliza replies that she heard everything. She just can't find the words right now. And the idea that the royal guards of this place don't even know the face of the emperor's consort makes her uncomfortable. The guard replies that it's not that they can't recognize her. It's just that there are many procedures that they have to follow in the imperial palace. This rule is one of them. He asks what brings Her Majesty to this place. Elise replies that she came here to contact someone. She asks, could there be any other reason? She's angry. More importantly, she wasn't even informed that there was a procedure for the emperor's consort to divulge details of her private life to ordinary guards. And now Eliza knows about it, and she should tell the head of the emperor's household. But the guard replies that this is not necessary. After all, this procedure usually affects aristocrats, so there is no need for the lady to bother herself with trifles. Eliza does not listen to the guards and goes forward. After a while, the protagonist is brought the magic orb and told that everything is ready. Then the girl leaves the protagonist, and soon Eliza is able to make contact. The protagonist hears a voice that says it's been a long time. The protagonist sees her teacher's reflection appear in the magic ball. The teacher asks, did Elisa call because she was dying? Or to lean on that little bit of affection that may have arisen between them as teacher and student? Elise replies that there's no possibility of any intimacy between them. She says that their relationship was formed only because of the bargain that was struck between them. And the teacher taught the protagonist magic, and she gave him her magic formulas that the teacher could pass off as his own. Eliza notices that the teacher hasn't changed after all. William is the head of the Western Magic Tower, one of the 3 magic towers in the entire empire, and a 7th grade wizard. He asks why Eliza called him then. The teacher replies that he only took the call because this guy was coming from the imperial palace, and if Elise is going to waste his time, he doesn't want to do it. But Eliza replies that there seems to be a rumor in the Mage Tower that William is no longer running any new formulas. She asks, is that really true? William replies that Eliza can no longer feel the mana flow through her body. He asks, does Eliza mean to say that she's created a new formula? After all, the girl may have been a genius at magic formulas, but such a thing is impossible. Eliza replies that it's true, but she asks, did the teacher really think that she gave all the formulas created in the magic tower to him? After all, they weren't on good terms. William is angry because it means that the protagonist managed to hide it even under the oppression of bans and surveillance. The protagonist asks if William thinks that it is not too late to give these formulas to him. She asks if the teacher doesn't need to secure his position as a magical tower. William asks what the protagonist wants, but Eliza only asks for a small favor. She asks that the teacher come to congratulate her son on his birthday. William asks, is all the protagonist wants is for him to arrive? But the protagonist replies that of course it is not. She asks that William come to the imperial castle of Barossa, and there they will talk. The protagonist says goodbye to the teacher. The teacher tries to stop the girl. Now Eliza is sure that William will definitely come to the feast. and now it's time for her to meet that child. That's her talking about Asensio. Meanwhile, Marquis Vladimir is angry at being pushed around as he pleases, and seeing that unpleasant face doesn't make him feel any better. After all, the Emperor said he would leave it all to the Marquis. He asked who else could handle the task. Then the Marquis Vladimir with his skills. He's heard that Asensio turned out to be a gifted swordsman, and the Emperor says that Asensio is more like his uncle than his father. Marquis Vladimir is angry with the Emperor. He will never forget how the Emperor left his older sister to rot in the imperial palace, and how he quietly watched his sister draw her last breath. Now, Marquis Vladimir would not allow Asensio to repeat her fate. Suddenly, Marquis Vladimir notices that the Emperor's second consort is there. He does not understand how Eliza is going to bewitch Asensio this time. At this time, the protagonist watches Asensio practicing. She notices that the boy's skills have grown again. He's only using a wooden sword so far, but his abilities are extraordinary. Elisa doesn't understand why Asensio is so excited. Elisa remembers that in the past, Asensio died 4 years from now, and this time Elisa is going to prevent it by all means. Unexpectedly, Marquis Vladimir approaches the protagonist and greets Her Majesty. Eliza says that they have not seen the Marquis for a long time. Marquis Vladimir is one of the 3 swordsmen in the Atian Empire, and heir to the most prestigious family of the Ducal House of Fountain. If he hadn't died on one of his missions, Asensio wouldn't have left so soon. Eliza thinks that if Vladimir would leave his title of Marquis and we should have the title of Duke, he would become Asensio's most powerful supporter. Marquis Valeroy says that because the protagonist has come here most likely. She has an important favor to ask of His Highness today. Eliza replies that that's exactly what she wants. Except her son's birthday is coming up, and Leon will be in awe of the Crown Prince's arrival on his birthday. Marquis Vladimir is surprised. He thought Eliza would ask Asensio not to come. He said that if Prince Asensio came to Leon's birthday party, the imperial consort Isabel would try to start a conflict and ruin the evening. He asks if Elisa can handle it. The protagonist replies that she is going to send her an invitation, but nothing else Elisa will do. Marquis Vladimir doesn't understand. Is all the protagonist is going to do is send a letter of invitation? He thinks the sly fox is going to get hysterical. And he says that even if Elise is going to win the prince's favor, they can't promise her anything. Eliza realizes she doesn't need to take that risk. She agrees, but asks that the Marquis Valeroy remember something. It doesn't matter who a man is dealing with, or what kind of situation he's in. You always have to have a backup plan. They don't know what the future holds. Elise says she loves her son, but that doesn't change the fact that she favors Prince Asensio. She doesn't understand who wouldn't love this honest and innocent child. In fact, that's why she asks that the Marquis no longer allow the Emperor to use him as Asensio's sword. Eliza asks who will cut themselves on Vladimir's shards if it breaks. Marquis Vladimir thinks about how it has always bothered him. Asensio has only been able to survive until now because Marquis Vladimir exists. But if he leaves Asensio under these circumstances, Asensio could be in danger. He doesn't realize who will be able to protect Asensio after him. Elisa replies that she will be Asensio's support, even though she hasn't been able to do that in the past. But this time it will not be so. Marquis Vladimir doesn't understand what time Elisa is talking about, but he replies that everyone has a desire to protect someone, but only those who have the power have the right to make such promises. He asks if Elise can protect them. After all, she's lost her powers. But Elise repeats what she's already said. They should always think of alternatives. She asks why they're so sure she can't protect Asensio. Besides, she was only talking about Princess Asensio, but the safety of the Marquis was out of the question. Marquis Vladimir is incredibly surprised, but suddenly he remembers that Elisa is indeed right. Elise thinks about the fact that this is the imperial palace, where even children know how to hide their emotions. She wonders if a man in his 25s has such a lively face as a future man living in a palace. She hopes that Leon will be able to smile sincerely when he reaches the same age. Marquis Vladimir doesn't understand. Did the protagonist really just smile? After all, this is the imperial consort Eliza. Suddenly, Asensio runs up to them. He asks, what are the two of them talking so sweetly about? He's so pleased to see the two of them getting along. The protagonist greets His Highness. She says there's something she needs to be sure of. She asks that Asensio come to Leon's birthday party with the Crown Prince and see for himself what cards she holds and how far she is willing to go in cooperating with them and the Crown Prince. When the main character's son's birthday came, everyone congratulated him on his birthday. The guests were also grateful that Eliza had invited them. The protagonist hopes that the guests will have a wonderful time. The guests discuss the fact that the second imperial consort was never a woman who fit in as a baroness. They talk about how Eliza is certainly beautiful, but has never shone so brightly before. Today, however, she looks and acts like a completely different person. Leon turns to his mother and talks about how everyone is looking at her. Eliza asks, "Does she really have something on her face?" But Leon replies that it's because Mom is very pretty today. Suddenly, Asensio shows up and says that Leon is right and the lady looks great today. Leon sees his brother, and he runs into his arms. Asensio wishes his brother a happy birthday. Leon thanks his mom for inviting Asensio's brother. Elisa replies that there's no need to thank her. After all, she wanted to do something that would make her son happy. Asensio asks if Leon can see. He told him it was just a misunderstanding, and Her Majesty loves him very much. In the past, the protagonist has not noticed the envy of loneliness in Asensio's blue eyes. The protagonist walks up to Asensio and hugs him. She talks about his birthday coming up. If Asensio will let her, she would like to do the preparations for his birthday too. Asensio asks, "Is that really true?" Elisa replies that she will stand by him all day. Marquis Vladimir is angry at what he hears. The protagonist asks, "Is there something troubling the Marquis?" The Marquis thought the feast would be modest and the hall empty, but there are quite a few powerful aristocrats here, and they're all allied with Asensio. He thinks of Eliza practically declaring to the world that Asensio will do anything at the snap of her dainty fingers. And now, Marquis Vladimir suggests that apparently the protagonist wants to ally herself with the Crown Prince. He asks, "Is that really the reason she greets her guests with a majestic look? After all, Eliza even looks much more beautiful than usual." And looking at the way Eliza looks now, it is no exaggeration for him to say that she is an aristocrat who has been pampered all her life within the walls of the imperial castle. Eliza replies that not long ago, you said you could do nothing for her, even if she took Asensio's side. And today, the Marquis talks about her using him and Prince Asensio as bait. Ask Vladimir, does the protagonist deny this? Suddenly, Asensio bursts into their conversations and turns to Lord Vladimir and tells him that the protagonist's intentions are pure. Asensio himself has asked his supporters to come. He asks if the Crown Prince can't congratulate his younger brother on his birthday. The protagonist looks at the Marquis's behavior, and she feels as if she will be playing with 3 children. She turns to the Marquis and tells him not to show his anger. But if he's angry, he shouldn't cool down so quickly. Otherwise, people will think he's easy to calm down and won't take him seriously. The Marquis is angry, he asks. Does the protagonist think he's a fool for getting off so quickly? But the protagonist replies that she wants the Marquis to remember that she can be useful too. The same goes for this evening. She asks why Marquis is already thinking about how the ball will end if it's just starting. She talks about Marquis Vladimir being able to criticize her after the gala is over, but now she asks that Marquis enjoy the evening, in honor of her son's birthday. She says her long-awaited guest will arrive soon, and then Marquis can make his decision. But the protagonist has already made up her mind. At this time, the teacher William appears at the celebration of little Leon. The protagonist approaches the teacher and thanks him for coming. The teacher approaches the protagonist and tells her that they haven't seen each other for a long time, and Eliza is now the imperial consort, but fine as before. It seems to him that Elise, now she's also wearing better makeup. He thinks that if Elise has lost her powers, it's the only way she can get the Emperor's attention again. He asks, "Is that not so?" Elise asks in return, "Does the teacher really think so? Because if that's the case, then we shouldn't have come at all." And the teacher wasted his time. The teacher asks Eliza to prove the contrary. But first he wants Elise to tell him what kind of deal she wants to make. Eliza knows the teacher is a busy man, but he still has a few people to greet. Suddenly, a spouse named Sophia shows up. She is surprised at how many nobles have come to this place. She hopes she's not too late. The protagonist runs up to the guest and greets the imperial consort Sophia. She talks about Prince Stoneham thanking her for the visit. She asks, "Is this really Prince Leon's 6th birthday?" She just couldn't help but come to this celebration. Eliza turns around and says that if all the guests are gathered, she suggests they go to the center of the hall. Sophia is surprised that this was all the young mistress's greetings. She is angry. The protagonist approaches the teacher. She hands him a piece of paper and leaves. The heroine walks to the center of the hall and thanks all the guests for coming. Elise would like to thank her teacher for making time for her today, for despite the urgent matters that required his attention, he decided to come through the portal. Eliza says that Master William is a little distracted because he came during working hours, and she asks that the guests be understanding. He says he can't miss Prince Leon's first gala, as his godfather, and Elise is grateful that William cares for her son. William doesn't understand what the protagonist is even talking about. He gets angry, but Elisa tells the master about the 8th grade. The magic formula the protagonist just gave the teacher is remarkable in itself. Maybe she really did find a loophole to become an 8th grade magician, but the teacher doesn't understand how that's possible. Eliza must be telling the truth. The protagonist hopes everyone will enjoy tonight's celebration. The protagonist approaches the maid and asks Marie and her son to leave for now. The aristocrats of the Aetian Empire are currently divided into 3 major factions: the Eastern-Western nobles and the neutral nobles. The Crown Prince's faction is growing, but they are weak politically. It consists of neutral nobles but also supporters of the current emperor. Until now, they have not been taken seriously because of the limited power they have. But if rumors spread that the Westerners decided to join forces with the Crown Prince's faction through the protagonist, and the Crown Prince accepted the offer, the other factions might feel threatened and target the Crown Prince's allies, including the protagonist herself. But she has nothing to lose. But the Crown Prince's faction is unlikely to want to take that risk. Now, Eliza turns to the Marquis of Lemire and says that it is time to make a choice. For the sake of winning this battle, they must surely choose. Vladimir replies that there's no need to get involved in dubious ventures to chase the fox. But the protagonist asks them who told them the fox was their enemy. The Marquis turns to Her Majesty and says that the neutral faction will not dare to make the first move. Eliza replies that the Marquis Vladimir can ally himself with his enemy's enemy, but they cannot befriend the Watcher. Eliza talks about his enemy me, someone they can defeat while fighting others. Eliza talks about how the real enemy is someone who watches everyone in this world with his order of his precious throne. He won't let the Crown Prince shine when the time comes. From what he hears, Marquis Vladimir drops his wineglass. The guests all turn in their direction and don't realize what is happening. Vladimir asks if the lady is hurt, but Eliza replies that Marquis Vladimir should choose. She asks that she be chosen over the Western Magic Tower and the Western faction. After all, if they don't want it, they can leave the ballroom with the Crown Prince and their factions right now, because even if they do, Eliza will make sure that they don't suffer the consequences of today's events. Marquis Vladimir asks how Eliza plans to deal with the rest of the nobles if they leave, but Eliza told them that they're trying to use the Crown Prince. After all, she'll take the problem on herself, and she will be the bait. Marquis Vladimir grabs the protagonist by the arm and asks why Elise is going so far, but the protagonist replies that they must trick everyone into thinking there's infighting in the Crown Prince's faction. Then no one will think the Crown Prince is their weakness. And if she's their choice, Eliza asks that they leave the ballroom with the faction, but leave Prince Asensio behind, and she will watch over him. Marquis Vladimir turns to Prince Asensio and asks what his choice is. Asensio replies that he trusts Her Majesty. The Marquis understands what the prince has told him, and then he decides to leave. Meanwhile, Sophia is watching what is going on and she is suspicious. She notices that something is going on here. After some time, Asensio and the protagonist meet Leon. Leon runs into his mother's arms because he has been waiting for them for so long. Elisa asks if Leon hasn't slept. The maid Marie replies that Leon had already fallen asleep, but as soon as he heard about her arrival, he jumped up and ran to his mother. The main character thanks her son for waiting for them. And now they can start the second party in honor of their son's birthday. Eliza talks about the hosts being here, but she doesn't realize where the guests are. She turns to the maid and tells her that Marie can join them too. The maid is incredibly surprised. She doesn't understand how she can do this. But Leon approaches the maid and says it's okay, she can sit at the table with them. Elise turns to her son and says that it's no big deal, but she has prepared a present for him. "It's a huge birthday cake," Leon asks. "Is that really the cake his mom made all by herself?" He thanks her for making it. But when everyone tastes the cake, it turns out it wasn't very good, and the main character is upset about it. For some reason, a lump of warmth burst out of the protagonist's heart and began to spread throughout her body. She watched her son and Asensio having fun. She feels that there is a tickle. But the feeling is amazing, and she doesn't even know how to describe it. But now she wants to protect the laughter of these kids. Leon also wanted to see his brother off, but when they were already walking him off, Leon fell asleep on his mother's shoulders. Asensio talks about today being Leon's birthday, but he kept looking at him. Asensio talks about how Leon is kind and he is grateful for that. Elisa turns to His Highness and says that Asensio is a good child too. Asensio thanks his mistress for the compliment, but he is too old to be called a child. Elisa realizes that Asensio is a child, but it seems to her that he had no childhood at all. He died before he even knew happiness and love. Suddenly, Elisa stops in the middle of the road and Asensio asks what's wrong. Elisa says that tomorrow, the consequences of their choices today will begin to manifest themselves, and that will be the epicenter of events. She's sure Asensio can handle it, but she wants to ask again if Asensio is okay. Asensio replies that of course he's fine. He's more worried about Lord Vladimir reprimanding him for his actions today than what will happen to him tomorrow. What he's saying is that the lady no longer needs to see him off, he thanks her. But suddenly, Asensio notices that there's something else. Something Elisa wants to tell him. Elisa replies that to prepare for what's about to happen, there's something she wants to ask the prince. She wants to ask the prince. Asensio knew there would be a request. He asks what Elisa wants. Elisa replies that Asensio will have to make extremely difficult decisions from now on. But if he succeeds, the factions watching them will let their guard down. And Asensio can buy Lord Vladimir enough time. Asensio says he's ready for that. But Elise has done so much for him that Asensio will do everything he can in return to support her in her time of need. Elisa replies that it is incredibly relieving for her to hear this. She asks that His Highness repeat after her. She asks that Asensio repeat that he is not well and he is tired. But Asensio looks at the protagonist in surprise. He doesn't understand what Elisa is even talking about. He asks why Elisa is asking for such a thing. Elisa replies that she will listen to all of Asensio's outrage and requests until all of Asensio's outrages are made up for. And she'll let the Marquis of Vladimir scold her when he returns. The protagonist talks about how Asensio must be very tired. She says it's okay to take a break once in a while. Asensio looks at the protagonist in surprise and says that he then asks that the mistress bake a cake for his birthday as well. He suggests that they all sit around and eat cake just like today. Eliza doesn't understand. Has this boy really been so lonely all this time? Elisa agrees with them, saying that he will be. She asks that Asensio try to reflect just a little more and think about what he really wants. Elisa says it's a promise. After a while, the protagonist was already in her room and she was very tired. The protagonist lay on her bed and she realized that it had been a very long, tiring day. But she still had fun. Suddenly, the protagonist doesn't notice a bruise on her arm, and she suspects that this bruise probably appeared when Marquis Vladimir took her hand. The death of Marquis Vladimir has raised many questions in the past. In an attempt to quell the rebel, Vaughn drove several fugitives into a wasted mine of mana crystals. It suddenly collapsed, and the debris crushed him to death. It was hard for everyone to believe that such a swordmaster had died. All the circumstances of the death were very strange. When the protagonist closes her eyes in the darkness, the demons of the past possess her again. She willingly merges with them and joins their bloody dance. But the girl realizes that all is well, for she knows that when she opens her eyes, Leon and Asensio will be there for her. So Elisa can sleep just a little longer, and this nightmare is not for her. The next day, the protagonist came out of her room and there was the teacher, William. He was holding a sheet with a formula in his hands. The protagonist came and sat opposite the teacher, but after a while she was about to leave. The teacher shouts after the protagonist and asks if she's sure she wants to leave. There was something she wanted to do, but Elise replies that she's not the only one who wanted something. But the teacher replies that of course she's not. He's got something he's dreaming about. But the protagonist doesn't have to cling to every opportunity to protect what's dear to her. He wonders who is more unhappy. Eliza asks, "Is it really that important?" The teacher doesn't understand what the protagonist is talking about. But Elise asks in return, does the teacher decide to take his precious time to discuss her suffering? Eliza keeps wondering, why is William so sure of his superiority? After all, the Empire of Atienne has 3 magical towers. Eliza chose the western one because it's the only one she can connect with, because William was her teacher. Or she'll want the teacher to realize that he didn't choose her. She chose him. Eliza asks if the teacher realizes what she's saying. William thinks about the fact that the Imperial Tower of Mages only responds to the Emperor's requests about the Emperor's first consort, has influence in the East, and it would be hard for the protagonist to get support from the other towers. But if she used the information about reaching the 8th grade magic class, she might be able to get them, provided that the information is real, of course. Eliza replies that the teacher dare not question it. She asks why she would lie about what is agreed upon. She takes the formula with the sheets to sign. All he has to do is pretend to be the kind teacher who took offense at his student's early departure. But now he's suddenly decided to give her a helping hand. She has no one outside the palace she can rely on. Eliza tells the master to remember that he must not only look after her and her son, but also the crown prince's safety. William asks if Eliza knows what he needs in return. After all, it will be just like the good old days. Eliza replies that the master can take all the glory for himself. As long as she can protect her children, these little things don't bother her. The teacher rejoices at this formula. It's a new interpretation of the magical theory that he's been thinking about all along. It's the key to the world on the other side of the wall William so desperately wants to explore. William wonders if he can finally reach another dimension. After all, small realizations are Mana's new path. But suddenly, blood starts coming out of the teacher's mouth. He wonders what Eliza has done. He doesn't understand how she dared to deceive him, but Eliza wonders if she tricked him. She asks, has the theory been proven false or ineffective? But the teacher replies that he's telling me that. He asks why only half the theory is here. Elisa asks who in their world reveals all their cards without signing a treaty. After all, this is just a demo. And Eliza will give magical formulas that the teacher can give out before the other tower mages, and magical theory that will help them reach the 8th grade. She wonders what the teacher will offer her in return. After all, she hopes William didn't think she'd give them away for nothing. The teacher asks what if Eliza later refuses to give them to him, but Eliza replies that she knows William will try to kill her, and she wouldn't do anything. That would put her children's lives or her own in danger. And once they're strong enough without the support of the West Tower, Eliza will keep her end of the bargain. She's offering to be honest. She asks if this game isn't worth all the candles, William. So she asks that the teacher not cheat on her and do the right thing. She leaves the room and now the teacher stands alone. At this time, the maid runs to Sophia's consort and tells her that the second imperial consort has just met with the head of the Western Magic Tower. At this time, the emperor was sitting nearby. He said that the second consort had been living so quietly that he didn't even know if she was alive or had already left them. But lately, they've been talking a lot. It's been 3 months since Leon's birthday banquet. After a meeting with the teacher, Elise asked him to send someone who could help with security and other problems concerning her palace. This man's name was Georg, and he was glad to know what the old man was like and how he could help the protagonist. And the girl standing next to him was Georg's apprentice named Gilliana. William had taken notice of Gilliana in the past and exploited her instead of the protagonist by having her create magical formulas. The formula that the protagonist used as bait for the teacher is a credit that Gilliana made from the past. The protagonist didn't know what happened to Georgie after William stole her student from her. But judging by the way Georg treats her like his granddaughter, his life has been far from easy. And from now on, their lives will be better than ever. They were serving the magic tower. At this time, the maid Marie and their son Leon enter their room. Leon runs to his mother and says that he came to wish her good morning, but suddenly Leon notices that Juliana's here too, and he runs up to the girl. Eliza talks about how Juliana and Leon look like brother and sister when they hold hands like that. Leon tells his mom that Asensio has invited them over for dinner. Elisa asks if Juliana would mind joining them for dinner. Juliana, of course, agrees. Elisa thought that Juliana and Asensio would be friends because they are the same age, but it turned out to be the opposite. Elisa enjoyed every second of it. She wishes there would always be times of peace like this. At this time, one of the knights named Dominic asks what he is thinking about besides the prince. The guy replies to keep his voice down. After all, His Highness is having fencing lessons at this time, and His Highness will be arriving at this place soon. The boy asks what Dominic will do if His Highness hears this, but Dominic replies that he'll get nothing out of it. After all, they have worked so hard to become the second most important imperial knights. And their families expect them to rise to the top. They don't understand why His Highness does what he wants to them when he is bewitched by a woman. Asensio apologizes to Her Majesty. He didn't want the lady to have to listen to this because of him. Asensio says he's going to go and deal with those knights. But Eliza stops the guy and says that she will go with him. Dominic continues to say that if it were not for this woman, they would have been treated very differently. Suddenly, His Majesty is behind them. Dominic hopes Asensio didn't hear everything he said. He doesn't understand why the second imperial consort is here. He realizes that if everyone is here, this is his chance to speak. He bows to His Highness and asks that Asensio understand that he said it in good faith. He knows it's a bad thing to talk about His Highness. It's a serious offense, but he's not the only one who feels that way. The entire second squad shares his thoughts. He asks why His Majesty has abandoned them. Asensio replies that he did nothing of the sort. Then why were they called to isolate them in the palace? The Crown Prince's faction cut off all support, and there was a lot of talk of His Highness leaving their homes. And it all started the moment Asensio distanced himself from the Marquis of Lemire and became closer to the second imperial consort. Elisa replies that it's all incredible nonsense. Dominique asks, was it really addressed to him? Eliza may not know much about knights, but what she does know is that this kind of behavior is simply unacceptable. Knights are warriors willing to sacrifice their lives to do their master's bidding. But Dominique does the opposite to everyone else and tries to push her young master into pity, and he provokes others to do the same. Elise asks what could be so important to a knight that he betrayed his master. Dominic turns to Her Majesty and says that maybe the knights have wronged her in the past, since she is a former Mac. But to say so is too cruel, even though Eliza is the Emperor's consort. But even she can't hurt a knight's dignity and honor. He asks that Eliza be grateful for losing her magic. After all, it's the only reason that keeps her from challenging her to a duel at this moment. Eliza is surprised at the insolence of this knight. She says she will challenge him to a duel in person if that is the case. She speaks of Dominic insulting her child, and says that she has hurt him through. Eliza asks if it can be ignored. After all, if the duel Dominic has been talking about here is going to set things right, she suggests they fight. Dominic replies that he never insulted Prince Leon. All women of the palace who have received the imperial seal are considered wives of the emperor, as well as the mothers of his children. And Eliza says that even though she didn't give the prince the crowns, it doesn't mean he's her son. Knights cannot compete recklessly. They must take responsibility for all consequences. If he hurts the lady, he must take responsibility for it. Eliza says the boy needn't worry about that. She'll bear the burden of that responsibility herself. At this point, Eliza pulls the knife from the knight and tells him that he has only two choices. Dominic can run away with his tail between his legs, whining about his betrayed loyalties. Or he can accept her challenges to save only his reputation for as long as he can. Dominic wonders how dueling will help him. He realizes that things will only get worse. Eliza replies that as long as Dominic fights without mana, he can somehow justify this duel. Or have Dominic say that there was no choice since she ordered him to do it. She asks what the knight would do. But at that moment, the knight replies that he accepts Dominique's challenge. At this time, Marquis Vladimir comes to His Majesty the Emperor to ask if everything went well. Marquis Vladimir tells him that they have dealt with all the evil in New Harley. Daniel thinks that it took longer than he expected. The Emperor remembers that Marquis Vladimir had refused to go several times, but he seems to have had a good time there. Vladimir replies that a man can't not want to do something for any reason. Well, once a clear decree is issued, it's his knightly duty to take care of everything properly, and from now on, not a shadow of those demons will be allowed in New Harley Forest. The Emperor forced the Marquis to take part in a mission to clean up the forest. Vladimir took the chance and met various people in certain regions where the Emperor and the high nobles do not reach. During this time, the Grand Prince's faction likely began to complain that he had changed. Decisions made at the ball have turned the entire palace into a minefield. The Emperor assumes the Marquis must be tired. He asks, "Is Marquis Vladimir going to leave the palace right now?" Vladimir replies that he planned to visit the Crown Prince first. The Emperor replies that he hasn't visited the Crown Prince in a long time, so he says they will go together. Marquis Vladimir doesn't understand what the Emperor is thinking. He's never visited the Crown Prince, but Marquis Vladimir agrees with His Majesty. At this time, the protagonist is already preparing for battle. Suddenly, Asensio comes to her and asks for permission to fight in her place, but Elisa replies that she'll be fine and tells her the secret she will use. Asensio asks if the mistress is confident. Elisa answers that therefore the master should not worry too much. After a while, Eliza and Dominic are already out in the battle. The knight says that Eliza can strike first, but the protagonist replies that the knight should attack first. She can't run around with a sword, and she has to use all the strength that she has. The knight wonders how Domina can be so confident. Dominic thinks that if Domina was provoking him to make a fool of himself, she will regret it bitterly right now, and he figures he'll find out soon enough. He swings his sword to strike the protagonist, but Eliza manages to fend off that blow. The knights are just baffled by what's happening. They don't understand. Did the Emperor's second wife always know how to use a sword? It seems to them that Dominic recoiled a little. Dominic thinks that even though he's not using Manu, but at this rate he will look pathetic not only in front of the Crown Prince, but also the knights. He has no other choice and will no longer succumb to his mistress. Eliza notices that the knight's movements are quite predictable, and she has fought countless imperial knights in the past. But now she extends her sword, and Dominic has no time to fend off this blow, and the mistress's sword reaches straight for his neck. The knight realizes that he can't leave it this way. Dominic swipes his sword in response, and Eliza manages to fend off the blow at the last moment. She realizes this is bad. Her sword starts to crack and she can't dodge. But suddenly there is a guy who fends off the knight's blow by pushing him aside. Eliza asks why the guy saved her. The Emperor's first sword, the strongest knight with a heart of gold, and the man who died at the hands of the protagonist. It's Roan Scherzen. Leon, frightened, starts running to his mom. Asensio asks if the mistress is okay and if she's hurt anywhere. Elisa replies that she is fine. At that moment, the Emperor appears, and Asensio wonders why the Emperor is here. Earlier, when Eliza arrived at the Crown Prince's palace, she had heard that Marquis Vladimir had gone to the imperial castle. And when Eliza heard the discussion of the knights, she felt an extremely strong aura approaching this place. So she told Asensio not to worry. After all, the Marquis would be here soon. Naturally, Eliza thought that Marquis Vladimir would arrive, but then she greets His Majesty. The Emperor says it's been a long time since they last met. The Emperor came here with no certain expectations, but he is intrigued, because a few minutes ago when Eliza was fighting the knight, Marquis Vladimir asked, "What's going on here?" and he wanted to intervene, but the Emperor ordered Vladimir to wait. After all, the Emperor's second consort is not the kind of person who would fight someone homelessly. Now the Emperor turns to the second imperial consort and says that he didn't know Eliza was so good with a sword. Eliza replies that she only knows a couple tricks. The Emperor says that means these people who are confused by her cheap tricks, especially considering the girl's lack of mana, must be non-recyclable garbage. The knights fall to their knees and start begging the Emperor for mercy. Eliza talks about how strange this is. She asks why the knights would ask His Majesty for forgiveness when the Crown Prince is the only one they offended. The emperor replies that everything in the Atian Empire down to a stalk of grass belongs to him, and he sees no problem with him getting what the crown prince is entitled to. Elise asks if anyone would dare refute that fact. After all, the girl just said it out of pity. She says that if the knights apologize to the crown prince, His Highness would punish them to the extent of his authority. But it doesn't matter anymore, the emperor asks. Does Eliza say that his punishment would be harsher? But Eliza asks in return, is she not right? The emperor also knows the girl is right, and he must demonstrate his imperial authority. Meanwhile, the emperor wonders what he should do, and whether he should kill them all for their disobedience. After all, they'd be an example of what not to do. Or does he think he can cripple them so badly that they'll never be able to pick up a sword? Elise says the options are excellent, but if the knights have forgotten their knightly honor, she asks the emperor to give them an even more shameful punishment. As punishment for their transgression, she asks that the emperor disband the second troop and allow the crown prince to reassemble the troop at his discretion, so that they may realize what kind of master they have lost. The emperor asks, does Elise really want him to allow the crown prince to form a new second squad on his own? He asks, does Elise think such a thing is even possible? Elise answers, it is possible. There are capital guards. The Metropolitan Guard is a group of boys from aristocratic houses, as well as commoners who used to be squires. The crown prince would be the perfect master for them. The emperor asks what the crown prince will do with a bunch of wild dogs driven together to prevent them from barking everywhere they please. Eliza replies that they became wild dogs because they had no master, and if the emperor will give the crown prince a chance for a new second unit, it will serve as an excellent example for his future plans. The emperor turns to his second wife and asks if Eliza understands what she's talking about. But Eliza does not understand. Did her words seem absurd to the emperor? Caden is an emperor with great power, but it is not unlimited. It's because of the power of the nobles who have been building power since the time of the former emperor. Usually, when the emperor's authority is strong, the nobility is weaker. If it's the other way around, then the nobles will take over. But now, two forces that should be in balance are fighting each other for the right to dominate the other. The emperor is unhappy with high-ranking officials who suppress his authority. Eliza realizes that if the nobles become loyal subjects and defenders of the imperial palace, he will be able to split the aristocratic faction. The emperor approaches the protagonist and tells her that there seems to be a lot he didn't know about her, but he hopes they can catch up. The emperor asks if Eliza is a little bit new about herself. Eliza replies that she will do anything, at the emperor's pleasure. The emperor replies that he will remember that. As for the knights, following the girl's suggestion is not such a bad idea. He sees no reason to keep those ungrateful knights in the palace. Eliza thanks His Highness. Caden says that it is quite dangerous for the imperial consort to walk alone in the palace, and Caden asks that the protagonist be escorted. Roan Scherzen will do it. Leon asks, does His Majesty not love him? He pretends he doesn't exist. Elise approaches her son and asks why Leon thinks that. Leon replies that he's stupid, not good enough. Elisa turns to Asensio and asks, does Asensio think so too? She takes her son's hands and talks about the emperor's behavior, not because they're bad or not good enough at anything, it's because he's a disgusting person himself. Leon and Asensio are surprised by what Elisa said, but the protagonist replies that it's true. Elisa asks, didn't Asensio know that? Asensio replies that he really didn't know. There's no way he could have known about it. Elisa says it's all the emperor's fault. She asks if children need to prove anything to be loved by their parents. She hugs her sons and tells them not to let people like that hurt them. It doesn't matter what they say. After all, if a person tries to subjugate them or make them do something against their will, they should not put up with it and express their anger and should fight. For if it doesn't work, then they must raise a sword to their chest, even if that person is herself. Elise says for boys to love themselves more than anyone else. In order to understand those around them and share love with them, they must first strengthen themselves. She asks if the children understand what she is saying. At this point, Eliza turns to the knight and asks if Roan Scherzen will tell His Majesty about her humorous conversation with the children as one of the knights. Roan Scherzen replies that unless His Majesty asks him to, he will not say a word about it. Eliza recalls that this is very much like Sir Roan Shurzhen. He doesn't make promises he can't keep. She asks why the knight stayed. She thought Roan Shurzhen would follow His Majesty. Roan Shurzhen wanted to know when Eliza was going to visit the Capitol Guard, so he informed His Majesty and returned. Eliza asks what about noon in 3 days. Roan Shurzhen replies that it's fine, and he bids farewell to his mistress. But suddenly he freezes in the moment Eliza asks what's the matter. Roan Shurzhen talks about Eliza being hurt. Asensio asks if Her Highness is okay. At that moment, Roan Shurzhen holds out a handkerchief to his mistress. Elisa says that this handkerchief will be ruined. But Roan Shurzhen replies that Madam does not need to return it. There is a light yellow flower painted on the handkerchief. She asks if Princess Jolene is all right. Roan Shurzhen replies that she is fine. He asks if Eliza and the princess aren't close friends. Elise replies that they are not. She had heard rumors that the princess was good at embroidery, and she was reminded of that by looking at this handkerchief. Jolene Jin Lapalacia, one of the few members of the imperial family to survive the Kaidan massacre for the sole purpose of getting the knights standing opposite the protagonist. The princess betrayed her half-brother and crossed over to her half-brother Kaidan's side. The tragic love story Jolene that was weak and beautiful from birth serves as inspiration for many poets. Eliza realizes that of course it does if it can be considered love. They are about to leave. Suddenly, Gilliana asks Mistress if something has happened. But under her feet, the protagonist notices a broken glass, and it looks like a medicine used for abrasions and wounds. She doesn't understand why it's there. And it must be expensive. She doesn't understand. Maybe someone accidentally dropped it. She remembers that Marquis Vladimir never showed up, and she hopes nothing happened to him. After a while, they set off in the carriage and Leon asks his mother to look out the window. Elise asks, did her son see something interesting? Roan Shurzhen knew that they would arrive at the Middleton residence just people, but he didn't expect to see children begging ragged children and wandering around in shabby clothes. Eliza asks, isn't the capital city supposed to be the richest region in Atienne? She asks why this is happening here. Roan Shurzhen tells her there's been a drought for the last few years, and many people came with the hope that things would be better in the capital. But this year, there have been many signs of the rainy season. Elise thinks it's strange. After all, last year's rainy season started right after Leon's birthday. Going back in time, she thought that some events might have changed. But she doesn't understand what happened to the weather. After all, something else is probably behind it. But she tries to find out what it is. Leon turns to his mom and asks her not to get too upset. Elise doesn't understand. Did her son really think that she's upset about the kids? I wonder if the son feels for these people. Leon is very sad about what is happening in town. Elisa asks if the son wants to help these people. And then as soon as they return to the palace, she suggests that her son think about what they can do for these people. Leon asks, can they really help these people? Elise replies that of course they can, but even if they can't help them, that's okay. And if they can think of something, they can ask others for advice. But even if they don't have any ideas, it doesn't matter. The important thing is that they think about the problem together. She wants Leon to remember her efforts, and when the time comes, and her son will have the opportunity to do something, she asks that Leon make sure he can show them his kindness. Nothing in this world is meaningless. She asks that Leon therefore do whatever he wants. After a while, Roan Shurzhen helped them out of the carriage. People in the city did not understand what an imperial knight could do in this place. The protagonist and the knight approached one man. The man asks what brought them to this place. Eliza tells him that the emperor has authorized her to take the capital guards who are part of the sentinels. The man replies that he will then escort them to the knights. This is strange to the protagonist. She immediately sees that to this man, the knights are just another fad. The man tells her that the knights are on the floor above. When the protagonist and her son went inside, there were two knights fighting. They say that Tito will win this time, because Lassie's legs have been shaking since the last 3 rounds. Roan Shurzhen turns to the protagonist and asks if Eliza is sure that these knights can be useful. Eliza replies that if the knights were not, the emperors would not have agreed to their use. Eliza remembers that compared to the past. Now these knights even appear in a good light. Suddenly, the knights notice that someone has come to them, and the knights indignantly ask who they are. The knights tell these people to get out of the place. Sir Del appears from such shouting and asks why the knights are shouting so loudly. The captain asks the fair lady a familiar Leonie. The knights ask the captain if they know this girl. Eliza is angry and says that she will not forgive anyone who dares to defile the ears of the third prince. If there is a wish to keep their heads where they are, they'd better hold their tongues. She says it looks like the knights are ready for a serious conversation now. The girl says her name is Eliza Lepelsia and asks if the knights would like to make a deal. The captain wonders why all this one-actor theater, since their opinion doesn't matter anyway. He doesn't understand why the protagonist speaks as if she would actually do something in return. It makes his heart flutter. Eliza recalls that in the past, Sir Del sarcastically said that he would have kneeled if Eliza had tracked him down 5 years earlier. She realized that if she didn't put him in his place, the dog would bite her arm more than once. She approaches the captain and asks what he's waiting for. The captain asks in surprise, "Does he have to do something?" Eliza asks, hasn't Sir Del just voiced the price for himself and his subordinates? In the past, the protagonist met Sir Del Pirion a year after Asensio's death. Due to the threat of war with the first imperial consort, the protagonist desperately needed knights. The loose and feral capital guards were perfect for her needs. These well-trained watchdogs dutifully answered her call. The protagonist rewarded them generously. Eliza then approached the captain and asked how it felt to be rid of all the people who pointed the finger at him for the foul blood of House Pirion. Sir Del replied that for the first 10 years after becoming a guard, he thought every day he pitied her for a warrior as competent as he was. So he decided he would serve whoever paid the highest price. 10 years went by and Sir Del was of no use to anyone, so he had to stay in the Metropolitan Guard. And as time went on, he began to feel depressed and empty inside. So he decided to go with the flow. And he ended up being a mad dog who barked no matter what the situation. And when Elise came and offered him a house dog, he doubted her very much. But after a couple of fires and beatings, she thought it wasn't so bad. And now he can't die when life was just starting to get better. When Sir Del died, he was drafted as a watchdog for the main character, the Silver Flame Witch. Not by name, as he liked to call himself so often, but even in death, he was content to be the witch's watchdog. Now Elise can't use her powers, so this is the perfect opportunity to show her who's boss and tame this captain. Sir Del heard that the second Imperial unit has been disbanded. Judging by the fact that Eliza came all the way here, he can only assume the girls had something to do with it. But the Crown Prince could return to the Marquis of Lemire at any time. If that happens, all their efforts will be in vain. For a man who asks them to take such risks, Eliza seems too much. The protagonist asks, does the captain mean to say that he refuses her and the Crown Prince's offer? Realizing that Sir Del would definitely accept the offer, she can't say she blames them for their lack of pride. The knights simply haven't had the opportunity to demonstrate their skills until now. These men have the confidence to win, and no matter who the opponent is. Eliza says that despite their efforts, none of them have ever been rewarded or recognized for their efforts. So their current behavior is more than natural. Pride is something that can only be accumulated by having an audience, but people keep taking away the last bit of it the knights have left. But from now on, Eliza says things will be different. Sir Del doesn't understand whether the future will really change, but one thing he is sure of is that with such a master at the helm, he can do anything. So Sir Del falls to his knees and bows to his mistress. But the sword suddenly falls beside him. And Roan Sherzin says that anyone who dares to feel for the Emperor's woman will be charged with treason. But Sir Del doesn't understand what the knight is talking about. He asks if it's possible to feel anything for such a woman. After all, she may be beautiful, but he's not stupid enough not to see the witch inside her. Roan Sherzin tells the lady that people will start spreading rumors if they go too far. He suggests they finish for the day. Eliza replies that she is going to finish what she started. Sir Del asks why they came here together if they aren't even on the same side. He doesn't understand. Is this some kind of test to see whose orders he will obey? Leon approaches the knight and tells him that his mother told him that whatever belongs to her belongs to her son. So he asks the knight to give it to him, and he will give it to Mama. He speaks of Sir Del's loyalty, The knight realizes that by kissing the prince's shoe, he's sworn an oath to the lady and there'll be no reason for rumors. He realizes that the prince is pretty smart. And, anyway, he's decided to become a chain dog, so he doesn't care whose foot he kisses. But at that moment, Leon stops the knight and says that the knight can kiss his hands. The knight can't believe it's an angel prince. Has he been raised by this terrible witch? The knight kisses the boy's hands, and he thinks it's not so bad to be bewitched by these two. After a while, Leon tells him that Asensio is very kind and caring. They will enjoy serving the crown prince. Eliza recalls that Sir Del has disliked her son in the past, but now it seems he is willing to be his nanny. Eliza turns to the knight and tells him that she will convey his answer to the crown prince. She asks that the captain keep calm and wait until they send an official to recruit them. She says that a test will also need to come in to check their physical fitness and other little things. This is necessary to become an imperial knight, so she asks that they prepare themselves. Sir Del asks, "Do they really have to take this test?" The protagonist asks in surprise. Are they not sure of themselves? But Sir Del is sure of himself, of course. So Eliza says that in that case there will be no problem, and she looks forward to their working together. Eliza thinks that Sir Del should try to live and die as a man this time, not a witch's watchdog. He will be a knight. That has served the crown prince faithfully. After a while, the protagonist and her son head back to the carriage. Elise says her son has done well. After all, if it wasn't for Leon, there would have been trouble. But suddenly, a carriage wheel hit my carriage and it staggered. Roan Scherzen runs up to the lady and asks if Her Majesty is all right. Roan Scherzen turns to the driver and asks what happened. He is told that one tire hit a pothole. Eliza asks how long it will take to fix the tire. The driver replies that it will take about an hour. Leon suggests that his mother take a walk for a while. Roan Scherzen says that in that case, he should go first and look around. They get out with the carriage and walk around the city. Eliza wonders if there is a place in the city where they could go. Suddenly, they notice that there is a smell of something delicious. Elise asks if Leon wants to try it. The boy asks in surprise if he can have it, but Elise sees no reason to refuse. After all, Leon won't die if he tries it once. She gives her son the coins and tells Leon to buy as many as he wants. The boy asks in surprise, does he really have to do that? But Elise replies by asking if his son didn't just want to do it.